The sun has its minimum activity and maximum activity. We know about that from sunspots. But also we know that the magnetic field of the sun reverses every 11 years. And it is at the time of reversal that the loops appear to be most active, and therefore we have the largest number of storms.
Flipping magnetic poles from north to south is like the whole star turning itself inside out.
When new magnetic field comes up from below the surface of the sun, it seems to trigger the release of energy from these loops, which then is emitted into space.
It's magnetic energy that kicks cosmic storms off the sun's surface. And the storm will take with it a tremendous load of magnetism into space. Scientists now understand that the magnetic polarity of the storm is the single most critical factor to Earth. Opposite polarity equals disaster. If the storm points south, it collides with the Earth's own north-pointing field with tremendous force. Two magnetic fields colliding create an intense DC electric current. And it's this current that overloads power lines. In 1989, Hydro-Quebec experienced the full fury of an opposite polarity cosmic storm at solar maximum. From the far northern La Grande complex, 5 power lines stretching over 700 miles southward acted as lightning rods for cosmic current. In the year 2000, the most dangerous cosmic storms will attack again. 1989 was an especially dangerous year for cosmic storms, the peak of an 11-year cycle of solar activity. Scientists are now discovering the connection between this cycle and cosmic storms. They're looking for the cause, the driving forces behind the sun's turbulent moods. And it's the star's strange magnetic structure that could hold the answer. Visible loops exposing magnetic field lines are essential clues.
On the night of February 23, 1987, at the Las Campanas Observatory in southern Chile, Ian Shelton photographed the large Magellanic Cloud. As he developed his plates, he saw a bright object that was not on the previous plates. He thought it was only a flaw, but he walked outside to check it. In the sky, he saw a star he had never seen before. An object appearing so suddenly, he knew must be a supernova. Ian Shelton telegraphed the news of his discovery to the International Astrophysical Union, the IAU. Using global computer networks, the IAU announced the discovery to the world.
Supernova is the most powerful event, the biggest cataclysm one can imagine in the universe. The sun will shine at this rate for about 10 billion years and put out 10 to the 51 ergs. The supernova liberates that much energy in neutrinos in 10 seconds times 100.
Designated SN 1987A, the supernova is located in the Tarantula Nebula in the large Magellanic Cloud, the galaxy nearest to ours. Even though the supernova is 170,000 light-years away, it is the closest supernova since Johannes Kepler saw one in 1604 in the Milky Way.
Supernovae that are visible to the naked eye are really rather rare. I think only 3 have, outside the present one, have been seen in the last millennium. There was the Crab supernova, now known as the Crab Nebula, which was in 1054 and was even visible during the daylight.
SN 1987A reached a magnitude of 2.9, which is easily bright enough to be seen at night. It once was a faint star called Sandulic-69202, a blue supergiant, about 15 times the mass of our sun.
Well, one of the most important things that a supernova does do is to create new elements. It's a long-standing theory, and I believe this supernova and some other observations have confirmed it, that all of the heavier elements, things heavier than helium, have been produced as a byproduct of stellar evolution, with supernovae playing the dominant role. Now, how does this happen? Well, a star is always subject to its own gravity. So when it has no hydrogen to burn, gravity is going to win for a while, and the core of the star is going to contract and get hotter. And then it will ignite the next fuel that it has to burn, which is helium. It burns helium to carbon and oxygen, and it'll burn some of the carbon into neon and magnesium. And after that, it'll burn oxygen into silicon, eventually silicon into iron in the center of the star, about 1.5 solar masses. Now, it's a quirk of nuclear structure that when you've produced iron, you can't get any more energy out of nuclear fusion reactions. So the core becomes unstable at that point. Gravity is still there all the time trying to pull it down. And now with no fuel left to run on, the core collapses.
Small stars like our sun are not hot enough to burn carbon, and their nuclear fires die out. Then they cool over a period of billions of years to a very dark star, a black dwarf. Heavier stars are hot enough to burn carbon into oxygen, then silicon, and finally into iron. No more energy is available from fusion of iron nuclei, so the star stops producing heat. When the energy source is depleted, the gravity of the star causes the core to collapse inward.
And it falls very rapidly at speeds approaching a third the speed of light. And it collapses in a period no more than a second from something the size of the Earth to an object about 20 miles across.
In this giant nucleus, the protons and electrons of the iron are so close to each other that they combine to form neutrons. Thus, the core of the collapsing star becomes a giant ball of neutrons, a neutron star. If a collapsing star were big enough, its gravitational force would overcome even the forces that hold atomic nuclei together, and the core would become a black hole. Sandulik is probably not massive enough to form a black hole, so it reaches a point where its core cannot collapse any further. At this so-called point of maximum scrunch, the core bounces back and blows the rest of the star out into space with an explosion energy over 10 times the lifetime output of our sun. This explosion is a supernova. The energy emitted by a supernova is primarily composed of neutrinos, particles that very rarely interact with matter. Neutrinos can be detected in huge tanks of purified water, buried in mines in Japan and the United States. 3 hours before the first optical observations of the supernova were made, these detectors noted neutrino emissions somewhere in the direction of the Large Magellanic Cloud. The neutrinos interacted with the purified water and caused flashes of light which registered on arrays of photodetectors in the tanks. These detections were not discovered until later, but they confirmed current theories about how a supernova explodes.
When a star goes supernova, it releases radiation over a broad spectrum at many different times. There's a very interesting portion of that radiation, which is the radioactive decay energy. When the explosion first takes place, the high heat at that time takes lighter elements, such as, say, silicon, and fuses them, burns them into heavier elements, such as nickel-56. That radioactive decays then into cobalt-56. And then the cobalt-56 then decays into something that's very common that we all know, that is iron. And in fact, it's thought that a substantial part of the iron that we actually see around us is produced in supernovae. So for a time, say, about 4 months after the supernova itself, all the optical light we see really has its origin in the radioactivity of the cobalt, but that radioactivity is not in the gamma ray region, but is degraded into optical photons. We see it almost as heat, if you will. Later on, the remnant expands. The optical light curve starts falling off, and at the same time, the gamma ray light curve starts picking up, and we start seeing then the radiation coming out as pure gamma rays. So when we're looking then at the gamma rays from the radioactive decay of cobalt, we're actually looking at sort of in real time at elements that have just been produced, say, less than a year before.
In the year following the supernova, several experiments measured 847 keV gamma rays as well as other gamma ray radiation. This included the solar maximum mission already in orbit around the Earth, which is run by NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center, and instrument-laden balloons, which were launched in Australia. Some gamma rays from the supernova are scattered, lose energy, and emerge as X-rays or ultraviolet radiation. Japan launched the Ginga satellite, which detected some of these scattered X-rays. NASA's rocket-borne experiments in Australia also observed radiation in this wavelength. Other rocket-borne missions and the International Ultraviolet Explorer observed in the ultraviolet spectrum. Ultraviolet investigations are used to detect atomic phenomena near the outside of the supernova envelope. Infrared observations explore the inside of the envelope and the dust layer of the star before it exploded. These measurements reveal information about the density and temperature of the supernova and the formation of molecules within the envelope and in nearby space. The Kuiper Airborne Observatory, operated by NASA's Ames Research Center, flew several experiments over New Zealand to observe in this region of the spectrum. Since infrared wavelengths are absorbed by the air, the experiments were conducted high in the atmosphere.
It's very valuable to continue watching the supernova. In fact, the supernova is going to be watched for years to come. We certainly expect to see enhancements perhaps in the radio region, expect to see perhaps enhancements in the X-ray region, and a real prize would be eventually to see the pulsar that presumably was born when the supernova took place. Right now that pulsar is buried deep inside, and all of us would love to see it eventually, and we don't know. It may be seen in the next year, it may be seen in 10 years from now.
Observations in all ranges of the spectrum were made. Scientists will gain valuable insight into natural nucleosynthesis, the formation of heavy elements. Our solar system was created from these elements. We will gain understanding of the history of the Earth, as well as the rest of the universe, by studying the deaths of stars.
It sounds like science fiction. A cloud of solar radiation blasted from the surface of the sun to destroy things on Earth. Well, that's not exactly what happened 2 weeks ago, but it's not far from the truth. The communication satellite Telstar 401 was orbiting 22,000 miles above the Earth, relaying various TV shows from all over the country. At 6:15 in the morning on Saturday the 11th, the satellite went dead, and other satellites, including some secret Pentagon spy satellites, also took a hit. NASA scientists saw this cloud of electrically charged particles leave the surface of the sun several days before. The SOHO satellite, 1 million miles from Earth, is pointed constantly at the sun. It tracked the solar cloud as it moved toward Earth at about 600 miles a second. They've given CNN pictures of the cloud, which is called a coronal mass ejection, as it left the sun.
They go out in all directions, and the ones we get the best pictures of are the ones that are going out to the side, because you can watch it as it flows away from the sun, just like squeezing toothpaste out of a tube. It goes out. And the ones coming at the Earth are harder to see, but we do know they come at the Earth because we can see the effects when they do get to the Earth.
There's a constellation of satellites around the Earth looking at solar radiation, particularly large blasts like the one that hit the planet on January 10th and 11th.
What you see is the bright stuff when it gets as a ring around the sun, so we call these a halo, around this blocking disk, so we call these halo events.
Withrow says the radiation caused the northern lights to glow much brighter than normal, and one satellite picked up the glow from above.
And so what you're seeing as particles come into the Earth's atmosphere, they generate aurora. It's like you see northern lights, and except now you're seeing the global response to these particles which come in are focused by the magnetic field into this big ring around the North Magnetic Pole.
Could this solar radiation hurt people on Earth? Not a chance. The Earth's magnetic field and atmosphere shields the planet's surface, but there have been problems with electrical power systems down here.
When the Earth's magnetic field gets jostled, long wires become generators and generate currents. Our electric power grid gets extra currents when the magnetic field does this, and occasionally this causes loads on power transformers. There have been some that have been destroyed in the past.
The sun causes trouble in 11-year cycles. It's now at a low point, but in the year 2000, the cycle will peak, and damage to satellites, power equipment on the ground could increase dramatically.
It was business as usual in the very early hours of a March morning at Hydro-Quebec in Montreal. Electricity flowing through a huge grid, powering cities and towns across Canada and into the United States. For the system's operator, Serge Peach, it was a slow night, requiring only minor corrections to voltage fluctuations. But at 2:44 a.m., it all started to go wrong. A sudden alert from Chibougamau substation in the far north. The voltage is dangerously low.
I tried to bring up the voltage by opening some reactors, but I never had the time. This is one alarm, and within 6 seconds, a second one came, and a third one, and then dozens, and hundreds, and pages. You can't even read them, it just rolls and rolls.
Within seconds, the entire city of Montreal was blacked out. For large cities, power failures can trigger full-scale mayhem. In New York City in 1977, sudden power failure turned city streets into a war zone. The devastation of an entire power grid at Hydro-Quebec shocked the world.
I never thought, I couldn't believe that we could lose a whole net caused by solar magnetic storms.
Space Environment Center released a primer. It's a very interesting primer. In this report, following items are listed as possible failure items in a CME directed towards Earth. Keep in mind we are speaking here of normal CMEs even during the peaks of a solar cycle. Prophecy says that the anomalies in the sun are far beyond anything man has ever seen before. The powers of the laws that regulate the heavenly bodies shall be disorganized, said Jesus Christ. Remember that both Jesus Christ and his prophet Daniel said that a time of trouble was coming upon the earth that was worse than anything ever seen since the world was created. Almost all of the mystics, visionaries, and seers, such as Nostradamus, Mother Shipton, the Hopis, Noahs, Ruth Montgomery, and a host of others, imply the same thing. In other words, the laws of nature slowly begin to change and then accelerate until they are out of control, taking with them all the foundations of science and its observations. The word of Christ, however, also means that the flood of Noah, which was a total catastrophe, which included at least a partial polar shift, was of less magnitude and destruction than what lies just ahead. That also means that the giant earthquake of Peleg's day that divided the land up into the nations we know today was of less magnitude than what is coming. Thus, the polar shift in the days of Noah and the splitting apart of the world in the days of Peleg will not come close to the magnitude of destruction of the coming earth changes. Solar CMEs of regular strength can cause disrupted systems. These systems include communications, commercial TV via satellite, ground-to-air communications, ship-to-shore communications, amateur radio or shortwave interference, military detection, and early warning systems are all knocked out. Military defense and early warning systems can be fooled or shut down. Submarine detection systems use the magnetic signatures of submarines as input to their locating logic. Geomagnetic storms can mask and distort these signals, giving false and misleading returns. Imagine what would happen to the world communications if a mega CME were to hit the Earth. The ramifications are severe indeed. Navigation systems affected, LORAN and Omega, disrupts the radio wavelengths. GPS systems go down, which in turn disrupts military, police, government, and civilian navigation location systems. Satellites, orbits are changed due to heating of the upper atmosphere. Physical damage to computer chips and satellites, causing them to give false commands. Microchips can be fried, causing total failure, knocking entire systems out. TV reception, phone systems such as Iridium and Teledesic go down. Pagers go out. Curtailment of intelligence gathering is great because it knocks out all the surveillance systems. Electric power grids, as already seen, electric power grids can be totally knocked offline, and major blackouts or brownouts can occur. If a major CME far above normal were to strike us, we could not only have the nation's power grid destroyed, but also fry the computer chips in trucks, trains, aircraft, automobile, and most computers. This would result in total destruction of business functions, banking, stock markets, and cause a financial catastrophe. A major CME could totally wipe out all modern technology in a few minutes. Oil pipelines, rapidly fluctuating geomagnetic fields can induce currents in the pipelines. Flow meters are disrupted. Corrosion rates are increased dramatically. While the solar cycle has been nearly regular during the last 300 years, there was a period of 70 years during the 17th, 18th centuries where very few sunspots were seen. That drop in the number coincided with a little ice age in Europe, implying a sun-to-climate exchange. It should be obvious to all that if the sun were to go into a slight nova or unstable condition, that the Earth's climate would be radically changed. In biology, there is a growing body of evidence that changes in the geomagnetic field affect biological systems. Studies indicate that physically stressed human biological systems may respond to fluctuations in the geomagnetic field. There is a degradation of homing pigeons' navigational abilities during geomagnetic storms. Pigeons and other migratory animals, such as dolphins and whales, have internal biological compass composed of the mineral magnetite, wrapped in bundles of nerve cells. Changes in the sun cause changes in the Earth's magnetic field. Also, the magnetic poles of the Earth are now wandering to such a degree that runways have had to be renamed to the new magnetic headings now existing. Major changes in the sun are going to cause major changes in the Earth, changes so drastic that science will have no helpful answers for what is happening. Indeed, the powers that regulate the heavens will in fact be disorganized. Global warming, is the sun to blame? BBC News Online science editor David Whitehouse. Research suggests the magnetic flux from the sun more than doubled this century, as solar magnetism is closely linked with sunspot activity and the strength of sunlight reaching Earth. The increase could have produced warming in the global climate. The evidence for a more energetic sun comes from a new analysis of the magnetic fields between the planets carried on by Rutherford Appleton Laboratory near Oxford, UK. This is real. Scientists are finding changes in the sun. Scientists produced evidence that since 1964, the interplanetary magnetic field has increased in strength by 40%. Evidence from before the space age suggests that the magnetic field is 2.3 times stronger than it was in 1901. Scientists do not doubt that the increased magnetic field results from a more energetic sun. And they were able to capture some pictures of a major CME that shot off the sun. Tremendous explosion took place on the surface of the sun quite some time ago actually now, and for a few very nervous hours astronomers did not know whether it was headed for Earth, and it blew a jet of superheated plasma 600 miles per second out into outer space. And because of the internet, people were able to compare notes. The explosive event was a real planet buster, according to Dr. Richard Fisher of NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center. The magnetic energy within the cloud of superhot gas had interacted with the Earth's magnetic field. It would have sparked spectacular aurora at polar latitudes. If the magnetic energy within the cloud of superhot gas had interacted with the Earth's magnetic field, which it does usually from time to time, that's where you get your northern lights, you see. And they can become very, very strong. We have them right here in Wisconsin fairly frequently now. We never used to see them. But it can also induce power blackouts, block communications, trigger phantom commands to send satellites out of orbit. It knocks out cellular phones, all that sort of thing. It's very, very dangerous. The sun will show continued signs of instability, which will fill mankind with great fear as we approach the final end. Finally, it will increase in brightness to 7 times what it is now, and will scorch mankind with intense heat. There may be 2 phases to our sun's mini-nova. Pulse 1, a period of instability with major CMEs and variable brightness, then a short time of relative calm, and then a final phase where it mini-novas and is a trigger for a polar shift. And that will be deadly for all mankind's civilizations here on Earth. The Antichrist kingdom comes in the middle of these phases. Phase 1, unstable, large CMEs, variable light output, partial polar shift. Then the arrival of the Antichrist to save mankind from his dilemma, false millennium and a false golden age. Phase 2 is where the sun actually mini-novas. Men are scorched and burned with fire, and a full polar shift puts an end to mankind's rule upon planet Earth, and we start all over again in the new millennium with the real Jesus Christ. Straight line rise in the average of sunspots from 1800 all the way to the year 2000. Indeed, something is in fact happening to our sun. And what's strange about this is it's happening exactly at the right time in biblical prophecy for the timelines. As we will get into some of those, but it's coming right at around the year 2000 to 2007, where we have a high risk of a solar nova, or we could call a solar pulse. A nova is actually quite extensive when a sun novas or a star novas. This is more of a mini nova that is going to occur, and where the sun goes unstable for a little while, and it's going to be very, very frightening for those dwelling upon Earth. 1999 to the year 2000, the upsurge in the sun activity will continue. We produced this report some time ago, and it's actually happening. Upsurge continues, intensity increases in injections and storms upon the surface of the sun, and a magnetic pole shift in the sun most likely will occur between 2000 and June of 2000. Then all the way through to 2002, the sun should show signs of increasing instability, large ejections, disruptions, and a possible magnetic pole shift upon the Earth even. But by that time, definitely a magnetic pole shift will have occurred on the sun, or it should have, if all other observations are correct. 2001 to 2003, all the way to 2007, we could have variable and high instability in the sun. However, we do feel that there's a chance that it'll go into a calm period and settle down for a little bit before phase 2 actually erupts. Moreover, the light of the moon shall be the light of the sun, and the light of the sun shall be sevenfold as the light of 7 days, in a day that the Lord bindeth up the breach of his people, and healeth the stroke of their wounds. This is how God is going to terminate mankind's civilization on earth. And the fourth angel poured out his vial upon the sun, and power was given unto him to scorch men with fire. And men were scorched with great heat, and blasphemed the name of God, which has power over these plagues, and they repented not to give him his glory. This is an actual, literal pulse of the sun, or we could call it a mini-nova. There is a direct causal relationship to this sun mini-nova and a total polar shift. The sun novas and soon thereafter, the polar shift actually occurs. Behold, the Lord maketh the earth empty, maketh it waste, and turneth it upside down, and scattereth abroad the inhabitants thereof. The earth also is defiled unto the inhabitants thereof, because they have transgressed the laws, changed the ordinance, broken the everlasting covenant. Therefore has the earth, or the curse, devoured the earth, and they that dwell therein are desolate. Therefore the inhabitants of the earth are burned, and few men are left. Mankind was given charge to take care of planet Earth as well as have dominion over it. Well, we've taken the dominion without really taking care of it. And there were voices and thunders and lightnings, and there was a great earthquake, such as not since men were upon the earth, so mighty an earthquake and so great. And the great city was divided into 3 parts, and the cities of the nations fell. This is the final phase where God destroys all civilization upon planet Earth. Phase 1 does not do that. There is no question that unusual solar activity has direct and severe consequences to Earth, and that gravity, magnetism, and electromagnetic storms combined can trigger a polar shift.
Earth is protected from the solar wind by its magnetic force field, the magnetosphere. On the sunny side, it's squashed in by the force of the wind, like a balloon being pressed. On the night side, it's dragged out, trailing into space. Where the magnetic field touches the Earth, in the polar regions, the cosmic energy lights up the skies. Aurora, those mysterious shimmering lights in the polar skies, are caused by this energized stream. Charged solar particles excite oxygen and nitrogen molecules, which emit energy as red, green, and blue light. While the solar wind is constant, Every so often, our solar neighbor throws a temper tantrum, a cosmic storm. Cosmic storms are giant balls of violent energy hurled from the sun's surface. Reaching Earth, they pour massive amounts of energy into the outer layers of the atmosphere, shorting out satellite electronics and sometimes even reaching Earth's surface with powerful electric currents.
Some scientists are quite positive that when the Earth undergoes a magnetic pole shift, that the magnetic field of the Earth goes to zero. That is, it totally collapses. When it does, great shaking takes place. We are unprotected also from the many lethal rays of the sun, and if any CMEs were to hit Earth at the time of the magnetic field collapse, they could come all the way down to the Earth's surface, and it would cause major trouble for Earth. Many visionaries speak of a green haze that falls upon the Earth. Could this green haze or smoke be northern and southern lights only on the surface because of intense magnetic storms? Nobody knows for sure, but it does seem to have a relationship to solar activity. Visitors from space, close encounters of the catastrophic kind, the coming comets and asteroids. There's no question that the Bible teaches, and the visionaries all say the same thing. We are going to have a massive hit. Trigger a massive Earth change could be a close encounter with a large comet or an asteroid, which could cause major upheavals in the sun, orbits of the planets, their respective satellites, and cause the laws that regulate the heavenly bodies to become disorganized.
With Reuters, you said that it would be a catastrophe of major proportions if it hit Earth. How large a catastrophe? That would be the end of Earth? Do we know it?
Well, for example, the impact that we think took place, well, pretty definitely took place 65 million years ago at the Cretaceous-Tertiary boundary. This event on Jupiter is probably some significant fraction of the energy associated with the KT event. So if it happened on Earth, there would be tremendous ramifications. Even much smaller objects, it doesn't really take something even as large as what we have here. Even much smaller objects, like for example in 1908, when either a stony meteorite or a comet, a small comet, exploded above the Tunguska region of Siberia. If that would have happened over Europe, there are estimates that depending on exactly where it happened, you could have wiped out millions of people.
Go ahead. The important thing is that these impacts by large bodies happen less frequently.
Yeah. Just to give an idea of the magnitude, if Hal is right, if his upper limit for the sizes is close to the real size, we're talking about 100 million megatons of kinetic energy. 100 million megatons. Now, that number is so large it's hard to keep it in mind. If you put all of that into one body or distributed bodies and hit the Earth with that, I think we're talking about the kind of event that's associated with mass extinctions of species on Earth. Now, there's really and truly a global catastrophe. It might not take out the human race, but it would certainly be very bad times.
The impact of a comet like this would excavate a crater which would include the whole of Manhattan. Everything we can see here would just disappear, along with some miles of depth of rock underneath. Lumps of rock the size of these skyscrapers would start raining down upon Washington 30 or 40 seconds later. Chicago would get similar-sized rocks 2 or 3 minutes after that. Los Angeles and San Francisco another 5 minutes later. It truly would be calamitous for the whole of North America, indeed the whole of the world.
The odds of being killed by an impact from space are about 1 in a million per year, for you, for me, for everyone on planet Earth. 1 in a million is about the same risk we take each time we fly in a commercial airliner.
It's big, 1.5 miles across, 6 miles around, and over 1,000 feet high. However, it's not made of the same things that asteroids and comets are made of. It's made of sandstone, the kind of rock we find on Earth. But it does give us an idea of the scale of our problem.
In 1994, the fragments of a fractured comet slam into the giant planet Jupiter. Thanks to the Shoemakers and colleague David Levy, proof positive that rocks rain from the heavens. Before it tore apart, the comet was the size of Ayers Rock.
Comet Shoemaker-Levy 9 broke into 21 pieces and struck the king of the planets in full view of mankind. The supreme deity of the ancient Romans, the god of the heavens and of weather, identified with the Greek god Zeus. Jupiter represents Babylon and Lucifer, the usurpers of God. The book of Revelation outlines 21 judgments that will hit America, Babylon, and the world systems of Lucifer. Was Shoemaker-Levy 9 a direct warning of what is to shortly come to pass?
And then the news that Shoemaker-Levy is to collide with Jupiter.
We were just staring at each other, really not knowing what to say. And finally, Gene just shook his head and said, "I don't believe this. In our lifetimes, we're going to see an impact."
Like cosmic impresarios, Levy and the Shoemakers lift the curtain on the astronomical show of the century.
It was extraordinarily fortunate that we discovered this comet 14 months ahead of the impact, so it gave the whole astronomical community lots of time to get ready, and that's what really paid off.
Every telescope focuses on Jupiter. It's the week of the impacts, and these are the real pictures. In infrared, lower left, the plume of an impact. But why the concern? Our planet presents a serene countenance, a celestial bauble adrift in untroubled space. The savage forces that assail other worlds aren't here. Where are the scars? Where are the blemishes? They're there, if you know where to look.
Cameras aboard the spacecraft will begin taking pictures, returning thousands of photographs to Earth. Probing within 500 miles of the nucleus, our robot will give us our first look at the heart of Halley's Great Comet and a glimpse back to the dramatic moments of the birth of the solar system.
Although it may seem that comets and asteroids are placed into the heavens at random, and science would tend to confirm it, we know from the scriptures, however, that everything is set in an ideal place to work out what God has planned for man upon planet Earth. As God created the universe and Earth to be inhabited and has a master plan on a time schedule, then that means he also positioned the stars, constellations, comets, planets, asteroids, sun and moon in exact locations and speeds to work out his agenda for mankind's probation on planet Earth. Now that may sound like a wild statement, but it's true, because nothing happens by coincidence or chance when it comes to a comet strike or asteroid hit that would wipe out mankind. It is all on a master time schedule called the 6,000-year doctrine. The world endures 6,000 years, and 1,000 it shall be laid waste, Rabbi Katina. The world was ordained to endure, as all learned men affirm, 6,000 years, Bishop Latimer. The world is to exist for 6,000 years, Tena Debi Eliyahu. Now, these are all ancient writings, and it was a common teaching back in those days that the world was going to exist for 6,000 years, and then there would be a 1,000-year rest period. The Lord will make an end to everything in 6,000 years, and then he will establish the 1,000-year millennial kingdom as a time of special sanctity. Barnabas, who was a companion to the Apostle Paul. Let the philosophers know that the 6,000th year is not yet completed, and when this number is completed, the consummation must take place. Lactantius, Book of Divine Institutes, wrote that in 325 A.D. If the 6,000-year doctrine is true, as the early church taught it was, and Adam was created in 4002 B.C., then 6,000 years are up in 1997. However, our datings and calendars may be wrong, thus we have to watch for the signs to confirm these things. But beloved, be not ignorant of this one thing, that one day is with the Lord as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as one day. That you'll find in 2 Peter 3:8. And what Peter is talking about here is the 6 days of creation equaling 6,000 years of mankind's time. For 1,000 years in thy sight are but as yesterday when it is past, and as a watch in the night. Now learn a parable of the fig tree. When his branch is yet tender and puts forth leaves, you know that summer is nigh. So likewise ye, when ye shall see all these things, know that it is near, even at the doors. Verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. Matthew 24:32-35. Everything is done in its season and in its time and by appointment. The fig tree is Zionist Israel. And when Israel in the Middle East starts to form, we have entered into the last and the final generation, according to the Lord Jesus Christ. The foundation upon which modern Israel rests is the taking of Jerusalem on December 9th, 1917 by General Allenby. In its timing, the taking of Jerusalem by England actually lays the foundation for the regathering of Israel back to the land of their forefathers. But ye, O mountains of Israel, ye shall shoot forth your branches and yield your fruit to my people of Israel, for they are at hand to come. For behold, I am for you, and I will turn unto you, and ye shall be tilled and sown. And I will multiply men upon you, all the house of Israel, even all of it, and the cities shall be inhabited, and the waste places shall be builded. The regathering of Israel in the Middle East and the implied 80-year lifespan granted to it from 12/9/17 to 12/9/97 has already been fulfilled. We are now under a period of time known as soon, which is most likely not longer than 9 years. It takes it to 2006. This means that the mega earth changes could begin in 1999-2001 area. It disagrees with many many visionaries, mystics and seers, all are converging about the same period of time. Nostradamus was very specific in the time of a comet near miss and a partial polar shift. He said that the King of Terror would appear in the heavens in 1999. That agrees with many Bible chronologists who say the tribulation should also begin in the fall of 1999. Is that trigger Comet Lee? Comet Lee is a deep space object that was discovered on April 16, 1999. As far as we know, it's never been here before. It will come over the sun. Nostradamus said that a total eclipse of the sun would reveal this comet to the world on August 11th, 1999. We have a total eclipse. Will anything be seen? Angel sounded, and as it were, a great mountain burning with fire was cast into the sea, and the third part of the sea became blood, and the third part of the creatures that were in the sea died. What is this great mountain burning with fire? A meteor or a very large comet? Halley's comet was probed, and it reveals that comets actually look like burning mountains. This is an actual picture you're looking at of a space probe that went up and intercepted Halley's comet. It looks like a huge mountain that's on fire. And remember that Hale-Bopp is a very big comet. The piece you'd be looking at if that were Hale-Bopp is over 25 miles across. But this looks very much like a burning mountain. And if it came down into the atmosphere, it would look like a burning mountain, and it would be cast into the sea, and it would be large enough to destroy a third of all the ships and a third of all living creatures in the sea. This would be absolutely catastrophic for our modern civilization. So when God says he's going to do something to destroy us, he's not fooling. The tidal waves would be massive, destroying many coastal cities and killing millions of people. In the documentary 3 Minutes to Impact, they showed how a small meteor could destroy a coastal city.
We should be worried about an asteroid with a diameter 200 meters, which is, say, 3 times as big as the building you see over there. That kind of an asteroid will hit the Earth once in every 4,000 years or so. Now, the Pacific Ocean occupies about 30% of the surface of the Earth, so it means that such an asteroid would hit somewhere in the Pacific once in every 10,000 years. And I think the government should take this problem very seriously.
But successive Japanese governments ignore the problem. Each day, $2 billion is traded on the Tokyo Stock Exchange. A fraction of this would fund research to predict a tsunami disaster induced by an impact from space.
Insurance-wise, it's a good insurance and a good investment to spend, say, $40 million for the next 10 years. And I think compared with the government budget of Japan, this is a very, very minor fraction.
This is the 1% chance feared by Yabushita. As a projectile hits the Pacific, a ship 50 miles away sees the impact. But quickly, all traces are swallowed by the ocean. Minutes later, the vessel barely feels the shock wave as it sweeps by at 500 miles an hour. But beneath the surface, that ripple is the tip of a gigantic pressure pulse, stretching to the ocean bed. This is the invisible power of an evolving tsunami, fast and silent. When it meets the continental shelf, the pulse is forced upward to create a giant wave of death, the tsunami. As the last plane flees Tokyo, imagine the big one.
The burning mountain of Revelation is a much larger object than the one portrayed. It would destroy all the ships. In fact, the Bible says it destroys 1/3 of all the shipping of the world. And the third angel sounded, and there fell a great star from heaven, burning as it were a lamp, and it fell upon the third part of the rivers and upon the fountains of waters. And the name of the star is called Wormwood. And the third part of the waters became wormwood, and many men died of the waters because they were made bitter. This is a series of either comet or asteroid hits, one right after the other. This great star from the heavens destroys the water supply and makes it radioactive. It kills millions of people who drink of the radioactive water. So now we have at least 3 huge objects that come out of the heavens and hit the earth. There is an implication that America Babylon is also hit by a comet or asteroid soon after she is destroyed by nuclear fire. The attack and subsequent hit by the object move the earth out of its orbit. It is that much of a hit. They come from a far country, from the end of heaven, even the Lord and the weapons of his indignation to destroy the whole land, says Isaiah in 13:5. What are these weapons of the Lord's indignation that come from the end of heaven? Well, if you're dealing it from the earth, it means on the other side of the planet. But if you're dealing it from space, it means from outer space or deep space. For the stars of heaven and the constellations shall not give their light. The sun shall be darkened in his going forth, and the moon shall not cause her light to shine. And I will punish the world for their evil, and for the wicked of their iniquity. And I will cause the arrogancy of the proud to cease, and will lay low the haughtiness of the terrible. So whatever these weapons are, they cause massive damage to the entire earth, and they absolutely destroy the United States of America. Very few men survive, according to the Bible. They become as rare as fine gold, Isaiah says. Further, these massive hits cause a literal polar shift of the earth, and the earth topples over. Isaiah chapter 24, behold, the Lord maketh the earth empty, and maketh it waste, and turneth it upside down, and scattereth abroad the inhabitants thereof. The earth is utterly broken down, the earth is clean dissolved, the earth is moved exceedingly. The earth shall reel to and fro like a drunkard, and shall be removed like a cottage, and the transgression thereof shall be heavy upon it, and it shall fall and not rise again. The book of Revelation tells us that God uses comets or asteroids to totally destroy the present world system and to destroy the vast majority of mankind, and he does it because they rejected Jesus Christ. They rejected the cross. The rich men of the earth have known for some time that a major disaster was coming and evolved a plan to escape. It is called Alternative 3. Called a hoax, Alternative 3 is being implemented upon Earth. An intelligence operative, Dr. Peter Better, claimed it was also being done in the heavens. He's dead now, but he was a top-level intelligence operative. And it's called Alternative 3. The 2 primary means to escape coming destruction by pollution, overpopulation, and asteroid comet hits were the building of huge underground cities with connecting tunnels all over the United States, the construction of Mars and moon bases to take the select humans to. This was how they were going to escape. These 2 concepts were known as Alternative 2 and Alternative 3. The building of huge underground cities and tunnels is an established fact. It is even mentioned in the scriptures, and specifically in relation to Babylon. Dr. Peter Better claimed that the Rockefellers, using German UFO technology, have established manned bases on Mars and the moon. Scripture would tend to confirm this is true. How odd it was mentioned on 3 days to impact.
The biggest threat to the survival of humanity comes from impacts, at least the greatest threat we know of. On the scale of hundreds of millions of years, we must learn to defend ourselves from these impacts. And there are really 2 ways to go about it. One is to have a defense system that could shoot them down before they hit the Earth. And the other is to develop independent colonies of humans on Mars, for instance, so that if something terrible happened to the Earth, our civilization would survive on Mars and could back-populate the Earth again.
In Martian biospheres, geneticists husband the life forms of planet Earth. After the apocalypse, they return to our barren world with eggs and seeds and the precious stock of humankind. Comet Hyakutake in 1996, a reminder of our vulnerability. 2 miles wide, it swept in with only 2 months' notice. Hyakutake missed Earth by just 10 million miles. (1997) and Comet Hale-Bopp. This one is 15 miles wide, but it keeps its distance. There could have been another story.
I moved Hale-Bopp's orbit around, just changed one angle, it's fairly easy to do, and put a hypothetical Hale-Bopp on an impact trajectory with the Earth.
It takes the slightest nudge. Using software that predicted the Shoemaker-Levy 9 impacts on Jupiter, CHOTUS calculates the time and place of Hale-Bopp's collision with Earth, but with just 6 months' notice.
So, our hypothetical Hale-Bopp case would impact the Earth 1997, April the 24th, 5:35 in the afternoon, the latitude 48 degrees north, longitude 148 degrees east, somewhere in the Pacific north of Japan.
If we should have only a year or 18 months warning on a 10-mile comet headed for the Earth, something that could produce a mass extinction, we do not have any idea how we could avoid that. That is still the nightmare scenario.
Extinction. The reign of humankind is over.
Nostradamus quatrain, where all good is, everything right with the sun and moon. The heavenly bodies are being regulated as usual. There is no sign of trouble. Fears on earth are as usual for the end of the 20th century. Its ruin approaches. The sun, moon, and earth is referred to here. From the sky, it advances to vary your fortune. In other words, a comet is coming from outer space, and it will disturb the laws that govern the sun, moon, and the earth, changing the laws that govern them and creating a whole new situation. In the same state as the seventh rock, said Nostradamus. What is this seventh rock? Well, no one knows for sure, but it's most likely Phobos. Gordon Michael Scallion says that in a visionary dream he saw that Phobos left its orbit around Mars and made a close approach to Earth. Such a close encounter would be a catastrophic event for us here on Earth. Nostradamus in the year 1999, the 7th month, from the sky will come a great king of terror. 7th month could be either July or September, for the calendars have been changed. Most likely, it is, in fact, September. What is this king of terror? When the eclipse of the sun will be, which is on August 11th, 1999, and it goes right over France, where Nostradamus was raised, in broad daylight, the monster will be seen. Comet Lee is a daylight comet coming over the sun. It will be very visible during a solar eclipse. What is this king of terror? Well, we don't know. Is it Comet Lee? Or could it be another object that has been sighted near the sun? Everyone will differ on the interpretation. What damage will it do? How close will it get? High prices, says Nostradamus, unguarded. None will have prepared. People have to rush to stock up on food, water, clothing, and arms as the comet comes closer and panic begins to set in. And so runaway prices will occur. The movies Deep Impact and Armageddon showed this concept very well. The path of a comet is a determining factor on danger to Earth. However, all of these course projections are based upon normal law. If the laws that govern the heavenly bodies becomes disorganized, prediction of the path of a comet is impossible. And that's because all the observations that are made on comets are predicated on the laws always remaining the same. So trajectory remains the same, but that is not always true if the laws are changed. Secondly, if a comet approached the Earth from behind the Sun so that it was not detectable until after it passed the Sun, we would have little time to judge its actual path and would not know right away if it was a hit or a miss. People would definitely panic in this kind of a situation. It would be bedlam. Special U.S. Air Force Report 2025, Impact Report, interesting. The United States Air Force produced a special report on comet asteroid hits and what we could do about it. Of interest is the fact that they recognize that we could have little time before one hits. Nostradamus in his prophecy suggests this is the case because the sun hides it from view. It's only visible at a solar eclipse. That is, if his prophecy is accurate. They also realize global consequences if a comet or asteroid would hit the Earth. Then the Lord rained upon Sodom and Gomorrah brimstone and fire out of heaven. Could it be that that was the destruction by meteor shower? Other seers and mystics have seen the same concept. Mother Shipton, who wrote in the 1500s, said, "For in those wondrous far-off days, the women shall adopt the craze to dress like men in trousers wear, and to cut off their locks of hair. When pictures look alive with movements free, when ships like fishes swim beneath the sea, when men like birds shall scour the sky, then half the world, deep drenched in blood, shall die." As was Nostradamus, things are good and wondrous, everything is normal, and then sudden destruction appears to come out of nowhere. The dragon's tail is but a sign for mankind's fall and man's decline. Not every soul on earth will die as the dragon's tail goes sweeping by. Not every land on earth will sink, but these will wallow in stench and stink of rotting bodies of beast and man, of vegetation crisp on land. There's no question that the dragon's tail is the tail of a comet. Even the book of Revelation talks about Satan, and it may appear physically in the universe as a comet. For those who live in the century through, in fear and trembling this shall do, flee to the mountains and the dens, the bog and forest and wild fens, where storms will rage and oceans roar, when Gabriel stands on sea and shore, and he blows his wondrous horn, old worlds die, and new are born. The Bible also agrees that the world is caught by total surprise. Jesus said, "For as a snare shall it come upon all them that dwell on the face of the whole earth." Luke 21:35. "When they shall say peace and security, then sudden destruction cometh upon them as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape." Our world leaders, all of them, from President Clinton to Pope, the world leaders are all saying peace and security at this time. Hopi Indian prophecy says the period of this age will close with a gourd of ashes that will glow brighter than the sun. The earth will turn over 4 times, and mankind will end up in the lowest level of darkness. That's from the Hopi Survival Kit, and it comes from the Hopi Indian prophecies, which are remarkably accurate. A gourd with ashes or sparks looks just like a comet looks, with a head and then a curved tail. According to the prophecy, this direct hit causes the earth to tumble over 4 times. It would destroy everything on earth. Only a few would survive. Other visionaries as well have seen a comet that hits the earth. A Catholic visionary named Veronica said she saw a comet that goes behind the sun and breaks up, and a piece of it hits the sun, causing great trouble. As the comet comes around the sun and starts shooting off fiery chunks of rock, the comet hits the Earth in the ocean and causes tremendous damage. Is this the same vision as the Apostle John? There's no question that mankind is becoming aware of these things. Before the comet or asteroid hits, however, there will be a nuclear war, according to all the mystic seers and prophecies and prophets of the Bible. A nuclear war comes first, then a comet strike or an asteroid hit, and then Earth changes occur. After the Earth changes, Satan is cast down to Earth and arrives in UFOs with his angels, posing as the gods who created mankind, who has come to save us from the disasters. Nostradamus saw a war before and after the comet. The Hopis claim there is a major war that triggers a time of purification. The Bible says there is a world war that begins in the Middle East and spreads worldwide. Veronica, the Catholic prophet, says there is a war that triggers a time of the cleansing. The difference between the Bible and the visionaries is the interpretation of the period after the first phase of Earth changes. Most of them claim it is a golden age. However, the Bible prophets say it is the Antichrist's reign, and the Bible claims it is always 100% accurate, and to date, it has been. Uniformitarianism versus catastrophe. The Bible clearly teaches Earth catastrophe with long periods of normalcy in between the periods of cataclysm. In Genesis chapter 1, we find the first cataclysm, setting up the world for Adam and Eve. Then the flood of Noah was catastrophe number 2. Catastrophe number 3 that's recorded as the giant earthquake in Peleg's day that split apart the earth and made the nations as we know them today. And then, of course, we have upcoming catastrophe number 4. And in between these catastrophes, we have long periods of normalcy, I guess is the only way you could call it, where things are quiet and normal. And it's during these normal periods of time that modern science has based all of its observations and is predicating all of its theories on evolution and the length of time for the planets. Modern science has evolved during a time of uniform quiet in between the times of Earth catastrophe. Thus, modern scientists do not believe in catastrophe or catastrophic science because they have no evidence of it. Hence, they deny it and are very hostile towards that concept, even though there is a large amount of ancient writings that claim it, including the Bible. A vast amount of literature, ancient literature, does say we have catastrophe. Phase 1 of the upcoming one, we have a solar pulse, a comet or an asteroid near miss or hit, mega Earth changes, could include a partial polar shift, but in any event, it includes major destruction. Solar instability brings with it weather changes, violent thunderstorms, tornadoes F5 and over, mega hurricanes, straight line winds because jet streams will start coming down towards the surface of the Earth, record heat and cold waves, floods, blizzards, major snowstorms, major rainstorms, droughts. This has already begun. This year, for example, major hurricanes are predicted. 6 very severe hurricanes are predicted for 1999. Nostradamus, it is claimed, predict a deadly summer for 1999. And so as we go into this period when we're climbing up towards this first phase, you're going to see increasing weather and weather-related things happening. Geological changes, more frequent earthquakes, deeper and more powerful quakes, magnitude 10 and over, undersea quakes that cause tidal waves, volcanic activity increasing, tectonic plates begin to actually break up, the ring of fire comes alive, long dormant volcanoes become active, and new volcanoes will be forming all over the world. Interesting times will come to the people of America. Coastal regions begin to fall into the oceans. As poles melt, ocean levels begin to rise, causing low coastal areas and islands to vanish beneath the sea. This is already happening right now in Louisiana. Like many glaciers in this part of the Antarctic, the Mar has been retreating at a surprising rate over the past quarter century. Every year, more rock emerges from beneath the melting wall of ice behind Palma Station, a 40-man U.S. research center run by the National Science Foundation. Trying to figure out what's going on, giant ice shelves in the Antarctic are breaking up 15 times the rate predicted by scientists. Polar climate is warming so fast that great seas of ice are in full retreat, spawning thousands of Titanic-sized icebergs. And there will come magnetic changes upon the Earth. Unusually strong CMEs that hit the Earth would alter the magnetic poles and could easily trigger a magnetic pole reversal. It would also change the electromagnetic fields on Earth, and this in turn would trigger a whole host of changes. Magnetic changes would trigger bird migratory habits would begin to change. Fish and mammals in the sea would change their migratory habits. You'd find beaching of whales when you wouldn't expect it. Birds not able to find their way around because they all operate on a magnetic system within their systems. Humans would have a much lower resistance to disease and plagues because of immune system breakdowns. We are nothing but a body electric, and so when the electromagnetic system changes and our environment changes, it will affect us. Runways have to be renamed, as they have been already in Minneapolis, St. Paul International, and in Portland, Oregon. In a magnetic pole shift, it is thought that magnetic field goes to zero. Any protection from the lethal rays of the sun would vanish. If hit by a CME at that time, it would be deadly for those living on Earth. The Earth likewise would shake and tremble. Major earthquakes and volcanic activity would occur. And this may be part of the first phase of planetary changes. Well, where are we right now? We are entering into the first phase. The weather is more and more violent. Earthquakes are increasing. Volcanoes are heating up all over the world. The magnetic poles are moving. The sun is getting more unstable, and these trends will continue to increase. Hopis have a very interesting prophecy. The Hopi Indians say that the last technological feat of mankind is a space station. The International Space Station is now being constructed. We also have the Skylab in near, and we are therefore close to the time of purification. The elders say the hour is here. Though thou shalt exhaust thyself as the eagle, and thou set thy nest among the stars, thence will I bring thee down, saith the Lord. So the Hopis in the Bible agree. A comet and an asteroid hit, gigantic shockwaves and fire. If in the ocean, huge tidal waves, hundreds of feet high, if not thousands, tremendous earthquakes, volcanic activity, and a partial polar shift are all involved in a major comet strike. However, it must be pointed out that the sun acting up could cause far more damage to Earth and its climate in a few hours with a major flare than most projected comet or asteroid hits. And that is why scientists are now keeping a close watch. Changes of gravity and magnetism in the sun could even alter the orbits of the planets and their satellites. Solar anomalies are increasing rapidly, as this picture of the sun shows. Major trouble is coming, and Jesus Christ said that the trouble would start in the sun. Notice the huge solar storms, and the Earth would be about the size of a BB from a BB gun in relationship to this picture of the sun. We have not yet begun to reach the apex of cycle 23. Cycle 23 is the mini-nova pulse cycle, and we are going to see very strong sunspot activity and huge CMEs thrown off the surface. This could further disrupt spotting a comet or changing its course. Nostradamus claims that the monster comet comes from behind the sun and is not visible until a solar eclipse. NASA with SOHO will spot it long before the general public, but keep it secret until they have to reveal it. This means the comet's path and speed are such that it remains behind the sun the whole time of its approach before it passes by it. In other words, as it circles around the sun, even though it's coming in towards us, it's keeping up with the Earth speed around the sun so that we can't see it. The Millennium Group posted some interesting SOHO pictures on their website of an object in the area of the sun that is indeed a monster object, but what is it? No one knows or is not saying. Could Comet Lee interact with the object and start the whole chain of events foreseen by Nostradamus and the Bible? You can see it. It looks like a tadpole out there. It's not just a solar flare. A comet hit or near miss asteroid could cause a partial polar shift. Polar shift mechanics is what we're going to look at now. And I will tell you the reason of this. There have been and there will be again many destructions of mankind arising out of many causes. And that's a very important thing. There have been and there will be again many destructions of mankind arising out of many causes. This is a priest of Egypt speaking to Solon, who had journeyed there and was collecting information. A declination of the bodies moving around the earth and in the heavens, and a great conflagration of things upon the earth recurring at long intervals of time. In other words, there's a giant catastrophe, the earth settles back down, humankind reemerges and builds again. Now, the Holy Bible, believe it or not, would agree with that concept. Chapter 24 of Isaiah, "Behold, the Lord maketh the earth empty, and maketh it waste, and turneth it upside down, and scattereth abroad the inhabitants thereof. And it shall be as with the people, so with the priest, as with the servant, so as his master." There is no respecter of people here. The earth is utterly broken down, the earth is clean dissolved, the earth is moved exceedingly, the earth shall reel to and fro like a drunkard, and shall be removed like a cottage, and a transgression thereof shall be heavy upon it, and it shall fall and not rise again. What Isaiah is actually talking about is what we would know as a polar shift. This is a literal shift of the Earth's axis. in space. The Earth literally turns upside down. This turning of the Earth causes great catastrophic storms upon the Earth, because this shift of the Earth takes place in a matter of hours, according to the Bible. What Isaiah is referring to in this particular thing is the gigantic shift that closes down the age of man and the age of man's probation, this age, before we enter the millennium. We are already having numerous signs of the shift, with earthquakes and volcanoes rising rapidly. This will continue as storms increase, as Mother Nature appears to go berserk. There will be a brief reprieve while the Antichrist rises to power, which is part of the deception of man to think that he has actually entered into the millennial age, and then suddenly and virtually with no warning, all of the forces of nature will be unleashed again, and they culminate in this polar shift. Now remember that Isaiah spoke about how the world will wobble to and fro like a drunkard man. It will find a new equilibrium, and then it will begin a new orbit around the sun, and a whole new climate and a whole new earth will emerge on the other side. And the fact is, the Bible says that man who survives only in very rare numbers will have no recollection of the age that went before. And so it is that the concept of Atlantis being a great nation of high technology is not that unusual in the fact that it could have been sunk in the ocean by a cataclysmic event which we believe was the flood of the Bible in Noah's day, and that involved in that flood was also a polar shift, and the world shifted to its present orbit and its present position that it has at the present time. And unto Eber were born 2 sons. The name of one was Peleg, for in his days was the earth divided. Now this is very interesting, because Peleg was born after the flood of Noah, but it also says, for in his days was the earth divided. And that actually means, Peleg itself means earthquake, and the earth divided means it was split up. And I beheld when he had opened the 6th seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood, and the stars of heaven fell unto the earth, even as a fig tree casteth her untimely figs when she is shaken of a mighty wind. And the heavens departed as a scroll when it is rolled together, and every mountain and island were moved out of their place. So what, in reality, Isaiah and Revelation are talking about here comes together. The Earth's surface here, not necessarily a very good rendition, but nonetheless this is what we have to work with. When a polar shift begins, the world, the surface, begins to shift rapidly in space. The atmosphere tries to keep up with the surface of the Earth, but it can't, because this shift is rapid. It's in a matter of hours. This creates a gigantic roll cloud, exactly as Revelation says. It's a gigantic roll cloud. The heavens roll together as a scroll because they simply cannot keep up with the Earth's surface. This creates a tremendous vacuum and a void, and super cold air, or practically space itself, rushes down to the surface and quick freezes everything in its path. The mountains are leveled in such a shift. This shift is so great, according to Isaiah, that every mountain disappears and the islands and the continents of the earth are totally rearranged. The entire surface of the earth is completely redone. And this is why God says that he creates a new heaven and a new earth. Everything is going to be different when we enter the millennium after this gigantic shift. But when Revelation tells you that the heavens roll together as a scroll, that's exactly what it means. And when it says that the stars appeared like they were falling to the ground, that's exactly what it would look like if you were standing on the earth and suddenly the earth rotated and you were at a spot on the planet where you could actually see all this happen and not get hurt. You would see the stars fall as though literally right to the earth. There are two methods by which the earth could have been divided. One is by actual, literal dividing of the continents themselves. And if you look at a globe, it appears very much like they did split apart in that method. The other method would be the sinking of certain areas and the rising of other areas, or a combination thereof. We weren't there, so we really don't know. But we do have the records of the ancients. Those records are the same from around the world. There was a cataclysm of tremendous impact upon the human race, and it all but destroyed the human race.
Let's suppose that the United States was suddenly to be racked with earthquakes and volcanic eruptions and tidal waves, and that the whole country was destroyed, and then finally it sunk to the bottom of the ocean. In 11,000 years, do you think they would find an airplane or automobile? Very unlikely, and they would probably conclude that America never existed. Well, I don't think it's difficult to think that technical civilizations have developed in the past. I mean, I can remember when there were no jet planes and no television and no computers and lasers, and that's in the last 50 to 100 years. So what could develop in 11,000 years is certainly, it could be more than that. But a technical civilization is probably the easiest kind to destroy, because it's based so much on people would know about an automobile, but most people couldn't build one if they were suddenly deprived of one.
If there is a polar shift, it is most likely going to have a pivot point right around where the Great Pyramids in Israel are, because most scholars feel that the center of the world's land masses is in that area. So that would be the most likely pivot point for a polar shift. That's very, very dangerous for us here in the United States, because even a partial shift, we are on the outside of that shift, and as you move away from the pivot point towards the 90-degree point, you have maximum damage. And the United States is right dead center in the center of maximum damage in a regular full polar shift that pivoted around the Jerusalem, Cairo area of the Earth. So what we're going to study now is phase one of land changes in the United States. And the United States does take a hit even in a partial shift. You can see from these visionary maps what happens to the coast. Visionaries like Gordon Michael Scallion have seen that America is to look like after the first phase of land changes. And he has produced a map showing both America and the entire world after these earth changes occur. Are they accurate? Well, we're going to examine that question. If you'd like this map, you can call Gordon at 1-800-628-7493. They are excellent maps. They are the most interesting maps that we have seen when it comes to earth changes and what he himself envisions. And although Gordon Michael is not absolutely accurate, his accuracy is running well above the 70% mark, probably above 80-85%. This is another map produced by another group called the I Am America map. But again, it's uncannily how they show the same basic parts of America being destroyed, the West Coast being almost totally destroyed. They claim that there are going to be 3 partial polar shifts. They contradict the Bible. The Bible doesn't say whether there's a partial one and then a full one, but in their visions, they claim that there will be 3 polar shifts, and that would, if there were, that would cause major destruction in the United States because of the fact that the pivot point would be around the Great Pyramids. The I Am America map, and you will find the same areas of the country are destroyed in the coming partial polar shift or Earth changes. We will now look at what geologists have to say. Remember that even in a partial polar shift, that America most likely would take the brunt of high winds, tsunamis, earthquakes, and volcanic activity because she is at the outermost part of that shift. If you take a look at geological maps, you'll find that California going inland are major earthquake zones going up through Montana, parts of Idaho, Nevada, Utah. All of those areas are subject to severe seismic operations. Then we have the New Madrid Fault, and then we have several areas in the Carolinas going up through to New York City, up through Vermont, New York, New Hampshire, and Maine also have some seismic activity. We're going to focus a little bit more on the California, Montana, Nevada, Utah area because of the number of people living there. You will notice all the way from Seattle down through to San Diego that the United States West Coast is under a severe earthquake probability factor. And that goes all the way in through Nevada and parts of Utah, Salt Lake City, etc., etc. And we have advised people, we have issued warnings to people living out there that it's time to move. If you don't consider moving in the very near future, it's going to be too late for you to move, and you won't have any property to sell either. So please take it into consideration. This map shows the fault lines just in California alone. Of course, you have the San Andreas Fault is the most well-known fault, but off from that come a lot of other faults, and there are many faults not known at this present time that are going to show up when the Earth's changes begin. And here's just a map of the last couple days, just before this video was made in June, around the 20th. And this is a map showing seismic activity all over the United States for the past several years, and you will notice the area on the west coast is exactly where Gordon Michael Scallion and the other visionaries say that the land is going to fall off and go into the sea. You'll also notice the New Madrid area is complete with a number of earthquakes, as well as parts along the east coast, New York, etc., up through Vermont. On the world map, you see the same ring of fire that we talked about, and how this is a map showing earthquakes over the last 5 years, I believe it was. And just look at that ring of fire, but again, focus on the United States in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, and you will see that same area that the mystics, the visionaries see as falling off into the ocean are the ones that are marked by the geologists and where all the earthquakes are forming. This is a map showing the seacoast off from Washington, Oregon, and California, where major fault lines and volcanoes actually exist. We have a seamount axial volcano out there that has been erupting and causing some trouble. And some geologists claim that this is going to start actually in the Oregon area, and that a major quake, probably exceeding 10 on the Richter scale, possibly as high as 12, will occur. And one geologist said that he felt that there would be a shear factor of 1,600 feet between the south and the north when this break actually occurred. And that, of course, would cause absolute and total devastation to anyone living in that area. Then the other area you want to be very careful of is the New Madrid area, and that covers the Mississippi Valley. And again, the visionaries and mystics all claim that the Great Lakes actually open up in a great wide, 50-mile wide Mississippi goes into the Gulf of Mexico. And again, they've had some major quakes in that area. And we await, I believe, another one. I think we're going to have some major quakes in that particular area. I don't think there's any question about it. And you can see the area that is affected if we had like a 10 or above quake. And then, of course, we have the Carolinas, parts of Tennessee that are seismically active, and Arkansas. And then, of course, you can begin to notice up there on the upper part of the screen, New York, and that region is slated for earthquake and seismic activity. And another major area is north of Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont along the St. Lawrence. And most visionaries, again, see that area as opening way, way up and allowing the ocean to come in. So the visionaries, what we're getting at is that the visionaries are not incorrect in what they're seeing. And it does relate directly to what geologists already know. Then you have, of course, your volcanoes, Mount Baker, Glacier Peak, Mount Rainier, Mount St. Helens, Mount Adams. In Washington State, Mount Rainier and Mount St. Helens, of course, as you already know, really blew its top. But Mount Rainier is a very, very dangerous volcano, and we do expect that that one will explode. Mount Hood, Mount Jefferson, Three Sisters, Newberry, Crater Lake, and Mount McLaughlin will all come active. And there will be many other areas in there that are not active right now that will become active when the Earth changes begin. If you go into their U.S. Geological Survey's charts, you see a whole region of basaltic lavas. All of those areas will come back alive. Another one you want to watch, of course, is Yellowstone. And it could be a very, very serious volcano if it triggers. And in an Earth change or a polar shift, partial polar shift, it would definitely come alive and trigger. They've already had a 7.5 and a 6.1 and 75, and that area could go at any time. In fact, the bed of Yellowstone Lake rises and falls by as much as 65 feet. One of these days, it will trigger, and when it does, it will cause utter devastation in that entire area of the United States. And of course, remember that the winds drift. And Doomsday Science, Newsweek, new theories about comets, asteroids, and how the world might end. There's something in the spirit of man that is making him wonder if something is not coming. And we can assure him from the pages of Scripture that there is a cosmic crash coming. It's going to kill a lot of people and destroy many lands. If these visionaries, mystics, and seers are correct, they're speaking about the massive earth changes of phase 1. And they all think that what is coming after that is a golden age of the gods, the rise of the new Atlantis, New Jerusalem. It will seem that way, even with ET contact, but it won't be that way. Remember, we have 2 phases to all of this. Phase 1, mega earth changes, then a calm period and a false millennium under a false messiah and ET contact. Phase 2, solar nova and total polar shift. Phase 2 destroys the earth and few men are left. So what we're facing is a delusion. Even him whose coming is after the working of Satan with all power and signs and lying wonders, and with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish, because they received not the love of the truth, that they might be saved. And for this cause God shall send them strong delusion, that they should believe a lie. They all might be damned who believed not in the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. So you see, we are coming into a delusion. Who is this coming with all lying signs and wonders? Well, it's none other than Satan himself, because right after World War III, in the first phase of earth changes, Satan is cast out of heaven unto the earth. He will come in UFOs and will declare himself our creators. The Elohim returned. Mankind has already bought into this lie, hook, line, and sinker. This is extremely dangerous. And this is where the Bible prophets are at total variance with the mystics, seers, and visionaries. The Bible is very clear. We will be rescued from war, earth changes, and solar disruptions by a false Messiah who leads the world into a false millennium. The mystics call it the New Golden Age, Atlantis come again, the New Jerusalem. This is a lie, and this is the deception. This is what almost all seers, visionaries, and mystics claim, that there will be an ET contact, and they are in reality fallen angels posing as extraterrestrials, and they will aid mankind in their next leap up the ladder of evolution into godhood status. Don't believe it, but you're going to have to make up your mind whether you believe the Bible and what it says, or the visionaries, mystics, and what they have to say, because the lie is in the calm period after the first phase.